What's up, guys? We are back with another Marvel Legends review, digging into the Fantastic Four Super Skrull wave, taking a look at some actual Fantastic Four members this time. We're taking a look at not one, but two. We're taking a look at Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, and we're taking a look at Sue Storm, Invisible Woman, or Sue Richards, I suppose. We've got these figures here in our standard Legends packaging, done up in the Fantastic Four motif. Figure in the window, logo down there on the bottom. You've got artwork on the side, and you can't see it now, but product shots and a lineup and a bio, as usual, on the back of the package. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here they are out of the package, our Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman figures in this new Super Skrull Build-A-Figure wave. These are, of course, very familiar figures to us because there's a ton of parts reuse going on here, but we've obviously got more modern, more current style of outfits, a few updates here and there, and then some different accessories. And I'm going to go ahead and say it that I really do think that it's a little weird that Hasbro is giving us a Dan Larson from Toy Galaxy head sculpt on this guy. I mean, talk about playing favorites, that's just ridiculous. But we're going to jump right into it, take a look at how these guys move around. You're not going to be surprised if you've played around with the Walgreens versions, the classic style figures, but let's run through them just for sake of consistency. So Reed here is again a very, very similar figure to what we have seen before. There is very minor changes as far as the structure of this figure goes, so much so that he still retains the arm removing capabilities of that previous figure. So you've got a head that can look up, almost unnaturally far, looks down really good. You can rotate side to side. Arms go out at the shoulder, they rotate. They are loose because you can just pop them out. Just like you were able to swap out those arms for the bendy arms in the Walgreens exclusive version, this guy is the same figure, so he still is able to swap those pieces. They are kind of soft ratcheted, so they're not going to go anywhere, but they're definitely not as tight as your standard figure. You've got a bicep swivel, we've got double jointed elbows, as is always the case. If I can get it to go, there you go. And then we've got hinges and we've got rotation at the wrist. You've got an ab crunch. He goes back a little bit and he goes forward pretty decently. Of course, you've got a waist twist. Legs go out about that far. They kick forward about 90 degrees. They kick backwards a little bit. You've got a thigh cut up there. We've got double jointed knees go all the way back. And then you've got rocker and you've got hinges down at those ankles for pretty solid range of motion. So he's still kind of a standard figure. There's really nothing new, nothing different, nothing missing on this guy either. He's a familiar figure when it comes to articulation. Where he is really different is the looks. And right out of the gate, most of that is going to be from the bodysuit. So our Walgreens exclusive line had the classic style Fantastic Four costumes. This is a more modern take, something that personally I'm not really familiar with, but I have seen it here and there just across the internet, and he looks pretty good. I'm not upset about this look at all. I know that some folks would prefer to have the classic set in its own wave rather than it having been exclusives, but of course, since we already have those figures, I get the idea where they were trying to get these out to a more broad audience, give us a new Fantastic Four wave. So of course, they can't just give us that classic suit again. People would be up in arms over that. So they give us a more modern look. And I think it's kind of cool. Like, I really like this suit. It's nothing too crazy. It's that same kind of teal color that we're used to, but just with black. So the teal is the accent rather than the black being the accent. And it's pretty clean and crisp. There's not a ton of paint. It's mostly just where the teal starts. So you've got some down here, you've got some on the feet, you've got it on the forearms and on the hands, and there's kind of like a knuckle design on the hands as well. You've got some around the hips. You've got a very, very cleanly applied 4 on the chest, and then there's a little bit of design on the triceps and then on the back as well. And then of course the neck is done up. So it is the exact same figure that you may or may not already have. If you have that Walgreens figure, as far as from the neck down, everything is the same except for these new feet. They're like weird little baseball cleats almost. I'm not a big fan of them. They don't exactly impede balance or articulation or anything. They're just kind of goofy. I don't get the design. It doesn't do anything for me, but it doesn't detract from the figure either. What's really the big change on this guy, though, obviously, is 100% this head sculpt, despite the fact that it's not exactly a new head sculpt, because it's really more of a retooling. It's very, very similar. There's some added changes here. You've got the beard, which is sculpted on. It's not just painted. It is actually there. There's some texture to it. You can feel that it's there. And then the rest of the face is something that we've seen before. It's just done up with a more aged Reed Richards. And I think it looks really good. The beard works. The gray touches in that beard work really nicely. And then you've got the gray that runs along the sides of his head. And it just looks like a more seasoned Reed Richards to me. I'm pretty happy with it. I was a big fan of that first head on the original Walgreens figure, and this one, it just adds a little something to it. It makes him different enough, tying into this particular suit, that he can be on your shelf maybe in a different section without looking like a carbon copy of a figure you've already had for a year or two. Where he is really different, though, is in the accessory department. So that first figure gave us the stretching ability with Reed in terms of his arms and giving us a somewhat bendy set of arms that you could swap out, hence the arms that pop out at the shoulder. This time around, though, we are getting a very weird example of his powers in the sense that he's got these elongated fingers. So you pop out the fist hands and you pop these guys on instead. And what's really weird is around the time that this wave was being shipped out for those first initial orders, I actually saw a panel of an upcoming or current comic that he is doing this exact thing in this suit with these hands, the whole deal, like it was planned or something. So it's kind of an odd thing. I'm not familiar with anything regarding modern Fantastic Four, but obviously this is an example of his powers. He can stretch his entire body, so it's not something that we haven't seen before. Is it weird? Yes, it's weird, but it definitely works. You can't really swap out the accessories between this one and the other figure, unfortunately, because the suits don't match up, so you'd have to do some repaints, really. But I like them, maybe swap one in, one out, one fist, and then one weird long finger. So you've got some options just to play around with them and at least have an example of how his powers work. Now with Sue, just like with Reed, she is again a huge retread of a figure that you may or may not have if you've got that Walgreens exclusive. She is just done up in the new suit. So as far as articulation goes, her head can look up a little bit because she's got a big old head of hair. She can look down really far though, and then you can rotate side to side. Arms go out at the shoulders. Mine are really, really tight on this figure. They rotate at the shoulder. You've got a single rotating elbow, which is of course standard. You've got hinges and rotation at the wrist. You've got a diaphragm cut, so she goes side to side, backwards and forwards, and then you can rotate in there. Legs go out only a little bit on this figure. They kick forward more than 90 degrees. They kick backwards a little bit. You do have a thigh cut there. We of course have got double jointed knees, and then you've got rocker and hinges at the ankles. Of course, no boot cut, no shin swivel, because this is a female figure. Of course, just like with Reed, a big thing for this figure is the difference in aesthetics. So she is not in the classic suit. She's in a more modern suit, but she is the same figure. Everything on this figure is exactly the same, except for a few little minor changes as far as sculpt goes. So to begin with, from the neck down, you've only got the new boots. She's got sort of high heel wedges going on with the little cleat things at the end of the toes. The rest of the figure, though, is exactly the same stuff we saw with that previous Walgreens figure, just done up in this new color scheme, which again, I like and it works pretty well. There's not really much more to say here. She is exactly the same as Reed in terms of how the suit looks. So the little teal accents, a very cleanly applied floor on a four on the chest, and then you've got a little bit of accents on the tricep area and then on the back. Where the biggest change for me comes in, outside of course the fact that she's wearing all black, is the head, because it might not look like it, but there are a few changes up here that make her stand out a little bit more. The biggest one being the hair. It is an entirely different hair sculpt from the figure that we got previously. The face and the overall head is still the same, just with different paint applications and a slightly different skin tone. She seems to be a little bit lighter in complexion this time around, but it makes her look very, very different by comparison. But the hair is entirely different. It's much longer. It covers her ears a little bit more, and then you've got some really cleanly applied paint on the face. The eyes are really clean and crisp and centered, and then the lips are a different color as well. They're much more bright red in comparison to the other lipstick shade that they had given her previously. And I was a fan, again, just like with Reed, I was a fan of that initial head sculpt. And this one changes it up just enough, maybe not as much as you might expect, but enough to make her, again, stand out as something different on your shelf in maybe two different sections. Just like with Reed, though, one area where they did change her up a bit further was in her accessory department. She doesn't come with anything except for this. She comes with a different example of her power. So that previous figure gave you some translucent replacement parts, arm and hands and stuff like that. This one gives you more of her force field projection rather than her invisibility. So you can actually swap this guy onto her hand here, and it just sort of fits like a glove over top of the splayed finger hand, and it looks like she is projecting a force field, which I really, really like. I love this method of example of power when it comes to any kind of figure with energy projection or anything like that, just to be able to do it rather than her just standing there with her hand outstretched with nothing on it, kind of like what you were able to do with that Walgreens figure, because the translucent parts were cool, but I always wanted something like this. And as minimal and as simple as this is, I mean, it really works. It's just a clear piece of plastic, but that's her power. Of course, we have to do a quick comparison of the figures just against the originals, since I've talked about them so much anyway. So you've got your originals on the outside and our new figures on the inside. And you can see that, well, there's just a lot of shared parts here, but the designs are entirely different. There's really not too much to compare against because, well, they are two instances of the same character just done up in different ways. I do think that from a general paint perspective that the new figures do kind of outshine the old in just a few QC areas, especially when it comes to the faces. I think the faces are much more well done as far as paint application goes. But then when it comes to accessories and overall aesthetics and suit design, it's kind of hard to top those originals. It really just comes down to what you want to do with your Fantastic Four figures. So overall, these are pretty decent figures. Again, like I said, it kind of comes down to, do you really care about this version of the figures? Do you care about the accessories they come with? Do you care about this look? Do you really want to build that Super Skrull? I think that's probably going to be what people really care about. But I like them. I think they work well. The suits look cool, despite the fact not being something that I really know a lot about. Paint applications are pretty nicely done. QC seems to be a little better in terms of just overall paint design and paint applications, especially when it comes to those faces. And I do like the small changes that make them different enough. Not talking about those suits in particular. There are a few little things that make them stand out, make them be a little bit more different outside of the fact that the colors are inverted on these guys. So that's going to do it for this look at the Marvel Legends Reed and Sue Richards. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.